Cool. So for Keyshot, what you want to do is upload an OBJ. So an OBJ file is your model saved in a kind of default way where it's an OBJ is able to be opened in a lot of different programs. So ZBrush accepts OBJs, Maya, Modo, Keyshot, they will all accept OBJs. They're kind of like the PDF of the modeling rod. So in order to get a OBJ, what we can do is in Maya, we select our geometry, go up to File, you can go Export Selection, and there's a little box next to that on the right hand side. So click on the Export Selection box. It's going to be set to Maya binary. We want to change that to OBJ. OBJ is towards the bottom, just called OBJ Export. So we'll click on that one there. What we want to do is exclude all of the history and stuff. So we're going to turn that off. I'm going to turn off include texture info because we're going to be texturing it anyway. We can turn off materials and all those things if you want to. If you have stuff grouped, you can keep that as well. Actually, I'll leave groups on just so that you can see. Obviously, I don't have any groups with mine, but objectively, you would want to save that. So I've got my model here. I can just go Export Selection. It's going to bring up a save box, and it's going to be navigating to my scene folder. So I can just call this one birdhouse out, and it's going to save as a .obj. Export Selection. And now I want to go back to Keyshot. And in Keyshot, you can press this import button down the bottom and navigate to your OBJ. And you'll get the import window. So the import window by default should be fine to just press import, but I'll just point out to you, you want to have under position, these ones ticked on. So you want center geometry on, snap to ground on, and you want environment and camera. You want your camera to be looking at your geometry and you want to fit your geometry to the environment. So just leave all of those by default okay, and just press import. And it's taken our OBJ and plopped it in. First thing you want to do is turn on performance mode. It's going to just render a lot faster and not take so long. So to navigate in Keyshot, I'm just left mouse clicking and dragging to rotate around my object. Middle mouse click is pan, and then scrolling is zoom. You also have those, you can also set what one your left click and drag is corresponding to. So you could set it to pan if you wanted, or you could set it to zoom. It's probably easiest to just keep it on tumble though. Okay, cool. So the two windows that we want to jump between with Keyshot are the library and the project window. So to open the library, you just press M, and it's going to take you to the materials section of the library. So we can see over here on the left, it says library, and we are in the materials tab. So the library has got materials, colors, texture, and environments. Those are the things that you'll be wanting to look at. Yeah, so that's where Keyshot has stored all of the default things for you to use, and they're really great. So the other window we want, which is going to be on the right-hand side, is your project window, and that is where you just press space, and it's going to be essentially your outliner like before. So in scene, we've got our model right here. It's called birdhouse low poly. So that's my piece of geometry. Because it's only one piece, it's just going to be represented by one piece. If you have multiple pieces of geometry, obviously when you're exporting your OBJ, you want to select all of those when you're doing your export selection, and it'll come in listing all of those separate components and keeping your group structures. Remember how we said in your export options for the OBJ, if you leave groups on, your groups will be maintained. Cool, but mine is all a single piece of geometry, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so in the project window, we have our outliner equivalent and we have materials. So this is where we edit all of our things from the library. So the library is where everything is located. The project window is where you can edit everything. So you can edit your material, you can edit your camera, you can edit your environment and your lighting, but this is where you find everything, is on the library side. So you're going to be jumping between these two. All right. So in materials, we can pick from the defaults. There's lots to choose from. You can choose, I don't know, fabric if you want to, for some reason. Yeah, obviously, depending on what you're wanting to do. There's also liquids, so you can just drag these onto your model. It's going to, if you have separate components, I believe it's just going to apply this to everything. If you have that happening, what you need to do is drag them instead to your outliner. So you'll have all of your components listed here. You can drag them onto them individually, and that way you can get around it just blanket applying it to everything. Obviously mine is all one piece, so no matter which one I do, it's not going to make a difference. But if my roof was separate, for example, I could add this one to my roof. Cool, so add your material. We can look, for example, at wood, because wood is what we'll see on a birdhouse probably. We have got the options here for procedural and traditional. The difference between these two is procedural textures are going to calculate your geometry for you and will apply the wood kind of corresponding to the directions of her geometry. So if I take one of these, for example, you can see it's wrapping around and it's trying to figure out your geometry for you. So that's procedural. Traditional is not quite so intuitive, and you have to do your own control. So if I drag on, for example, this light oak, you can see it's not really behaving the way I want it to. For certain pieces of, for certain materials, you are able to alter this. So if I go to the material tab in my project, I can double click on my active texture. And in my, I've got these couple of windows here. I've got properties and textures. In the textures tab, sometimes you'll have this option called mapping type, and you can change your mapping type to UV and it'll kind of act like procedural. So you can see this isn't perfect. This is the disadvantage of having a complex piece of geometry where everything is combined. If you have a piece like this and it's fine, you can cut these pieces up and apply the texture independently. It's going to be kind of up to the geometry. It's going to be up to what you're trying to do. Cool. So that's the difference between procedural and traditional is a little bit confusing, but as you go into it, you're gonna have to just kind of figure things out. Again, you can alter your textures over here. This one does not have the option to change it to a mapping type, but some of them do. It just kind of depends on what you have. So for now, I'm just going to use a procedural wood. I'm going to slap that one on there. Let's say in theory, I like how that looks. Great, let's move on. So that's just the materials as they come bundled in from Keyshot, but you can start to adjust them both on this side and this side. So if you go to the color tab, you can change it by dragging onto your color. Why didn't that work? Let me try green. Is it just taking a while? Maybe it doesn't want to do it to this one. I'm going to change this to the UV. Okay, so maybe the procedural doesn't let you do that, but some of them will allow you to drag on some colors to make some changes yourself. You can navigate through the color list to see what you've got available. So if you look at these kind of keywords, they're going to give you some suggestions. Like earthy, you can go with this pumpkin color. Again, with textures, you can do the same thing. You can make these alterations. So if I drag on a different texture, you can see it's going to give you the option to apply it as a diffuse, which is essentially your color, or a bump. So the bump is like I said before, the kind of illusion of this pitting quality. So you can do that as well. I'm just gonna add maybe this crackle texture, for example, is a bump map. Not gonna really see it too much. That's okay. Cool, so that's one way that you can go about doing things. And then for environments, you can make some nice changes too. If you want some really nice studio lighting, you can pick from these. You've got the ability to double click on some, you just double click to apply these. This is going to create the illusion of being outdoors and have that kind of green color reflecting onto it. You've also got some more of that studio lighting. So you could try one that creates a lot of nice contrast if you want something that's quite moody. It's a bit difficult to see because of the background right now, but what we can do is edit the background. So again, in the project side, remember that's where you do the editing. If you go to environment, we can transform the background to just be a flat color. So I can change it here to maybe like a dark kind of gray, but it's still got my studio lighting. Cool. So I'm just gonna pick one of these. I'm just gonna choose a metal quickly so I can really show you. I've got a very tessellated piece of geometry, so it's a bit hard to see, but if I go to this angle here, what we can do is rotate the lights around your object. So if you have a specific angle, like for us, we talked about wanting to render it from the front, right? But we don't like the way that the light is falling. You can rotate the lights around the space. And you do that by, oh, what is it for a Mac? Not that. Control with mouse, click and drag. It's not going to be control, it's going to be command. Oh, here we go, it's command. So if we press and hold command and click and hold the left mouse and click in the space, you can rotate your light around the viewport that your current camera. So we can kind of influence exactly where the lighting is coming from to create, you know, some nice room lighting or whatever you want to achieve, like some really moody lights. So have a go at that. Again, that was holding command, holding left click and dragging in the space. So have a little play with that. Cool. Once you are happy with everything and you want to render, I'm just going to move my light. Cool. So once you're happy with everything and you want to render, you can just bring up this render box down the bottom, the little camera. And there's a couple of settings that we want to enable. So let's first of all name our file. I want to name it Birdhouse Render. And I want to set my project location to I'm gonna set it to where my Maya stuff is. I'm gonna save it as a image in my, sorry, in my images. Press OK. You can leave it as a JPEG. What we want to do is make sure that the resolution is high enough. So in your resolution presets, you want to do a 720p or higher. 720p is good for web, so it's not too low. But if you want, you can go higher than that. The 720 on here is 1280 by 871. So anything above that is going to be good. So for example, 1920 is kind of for film, yeah. But then for web, you want like maybe 720p. So anything above that. And you want to leave it at probably 300 DPI maximum. All right, so under options, you want to make sure that your samples are high. So we can set our samples to 150, which is essentially double. Samples is the amount of light that's being calculated that's hitting your geometry, or at least I'm pretty sure that's what it means. Anyway, and then just click render. And it's going to bring up this new window. Once it's done rendering, it's going to be 100% down the bottom, and it's also going to have a green tick where this red X is. And it's going to save it in that location for you automatically. But yeah, that is the entire process for Keyshot. Obviously, it's a very basic rundown. You can have more of an in-depth manipulation of the materials on a kind of graph level. That's a little bit more advanced. If you want to learn about that, I recommend looking at Keyshot's YouTube channel. They've got some really helpful tutorials that are very short and sweet and specific. So if you use some specific terms, you can look up in their library of YouTube videos how to go about it. But in a basic form, this is how you would do some rendering. Cool. That is the whole demo.